Is that, do you have a problem where, and sometimes, because when I talk to the younger ones about finding mentors and doing all the kinds of things you're saying, they're like, guess they don't even mind us. Have we got to the point where people who are supposed to be in positions who would mentor younger ones are not there, or they don't care as much, or because that's what they complain, KSM. And so they tell me, KSM, you know how long I've been trying to reach you? You know, it's like, have things changed? Do we still have?
You know, I'm not clear in my own mind what the issues really are at the moment. I don't know whether we are overwhelmed by the fact that, you know, we're having to churn out so many people through the system, whether it's in the law faculty, the whole university context. I mean, when I was in Legon, there were 3,000 students. Now we have, what, 20-something thousand?
Yeah.
I mean, and the pressures on lecturers and so on and so forth. So I don't really understand the full story about where things stand now. But what is also clear to me is that if you have an educational system in which, you know, quantity is more important than quality, you really have a problem, because, yeah, quantity is important because you have a population and you must educate and so on. But if you're not ensuring that in terms of the availability of teaching personnel, teaching, you know, aids and so on, you know, science laboratories for the, you know, I mean, computers, you know, there are people in Ghana who studied computer science, and much of that study, they never saw a proper computer, you know. So I think we've got to address these issues about human development as what our education is about. It's not just about going from class to class in school, but it's about the human development and the human factor. And you know, I don't have the answers. I'm not really an educationist myself. I used to be a lecturer once upon a time, but I think we've got to look at these things in a really comprehensive perspective and try to ensure that it's not just about running a whole host of people through the system year after year. I mean, you hear some horrific stories in the law school. You know, I mean, exams and so many people failing and so on. You know, and it doesn't sit very well with some of us. It means something is wrong. I mean,
something is, because it's starting, I'm starting to connect to what they are complaining about, that people don't have time, people don't seem to. Now I'm starting to connect that the numbers have grown so much that it is very difficult to get that kind of attention now from anyone.
Yeah, but we saw that happening over time. I mean, and arrangements should have been made to ensure that the growth of the numbers was also, you know, in sync with the growth of teaching personnel, I mean, facilities, proper lectures, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's possible to have large numbers and still have, like, I mean, you remember in Legon in those days, N block, you know, we had lecture rooms, large numbers of people. But from what I gather, now it's completely out of hand. And that's an issue that I guess our educationists, you know, should confront. And I believe that in the law faculty, for instance, recently, the dean of the law faculty, you know, invited some of us who had taught from the past just to have a dialogue about how, you know, the current situation in the law faculty could be shaped by us reflecting based on our experience in the past and how it could be applied to. So I think there is some effort being put into.
Show some love, man. Oh, man. Now we're going to take one last break and go into the third phase of our interview. And because you drove us into oil and gas, something else happened while we were in oil and gas that I think we should touch on. Because that was the time that our great Tsatsu, they say, Charlie, you have caused financial loss, man. And you have done things. And we were sent to court and you were sent to jail. And that was a very, 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 very critical part of your whole life experience,
It
the
was.
things you learn. But I think I should shut up because when we come back, let's delve into that. Let's hear a little bit about that. Let's have a chat with Tsatsu. We'll continue with our chat after this break. We'll be right back.
The KSM Show.
Chatting with Tsatsu. And we're going into some very interesting areas, Tsatsu. Because, yeah, you're talking about the GMPC. We just talked about legal framework, the many things you developed. And then something we're blindsided by some strange accusations.
Well, I wasn't actually blindsided.
Oh, you were
Let
not
me-
blindsided.
Let me tell you why. You know, unfortunately, in the way this country works, I had been involved in GMPC under President Rawlings. And I was obviously seen as somebody that was close to President Rawlings. And a lot of credit obviously has to be given to his, interest at the time in developing GNPC and creating a new legal arrangement for oil and gas, because oil and gas previously was just part of mineral resources generally. Unfortunately, in the nature of this country, once a new government came, 2001, they wanted to throw overboard the things that he had been doing. And of course, I had headed GMPC during all that period, and I became a target. It's as simple as that. I became a direct target,
Yeah.
and they had to find something. And
Yeah.
the reason I say I wasn't blindsided is because, frankly, I could see
you saw it coming?
from the beginning of 2001 the determination by hook or by crook to find something against me. I could see that. And that's what led to all these exciting legal cases also.
Yeah.
The fast track court, I went to the Supreme Court. The fast track court was declared unconstitutional. And then they changed the panel. They added 2 more judges to the panel. They did a review. In those days, there were people criticizing the judges who made a decision in my favor. In fact, you should go and listen to what President Akufo-Addo, who was Attorney General at that time, you should see some of the things he said about the judges who gave a decision in my favor. But, there was a determination to overturn that decision. So, Justice Afre was appointed to the Supreme Court. And, another judge, Justice Lamte, was added to the panel. And so from a 5-4 in my favor, it became 6-5 against me. And then you remember the whole saga. I was taken to a series of courts. In one case, they withdrew it, then they took it to another case, it was thrown out, then they rearranged. There was a determination.
Yeah.
So in the end, that's why I'm saying that in the end, they got what they wanted by having me on June 18, 2008, thrown into jail. And what is
causing
amazing?
financial loss.
Yes, for causing financial loss. And the causing financial loss was in connection with a transaction that was introduced to GNPC by a bank, Merchant Bank, as our financial advisors, brought a project which involved also the International Finance Corporation, by the way, and we ended up as a corporate body getting involved in guaranteeing the company that was in that project. Now, it was a cocoa project, yes, and people say, what did cocoa have to do with oil?
Oil, yeah.
It's very simple. In fact, one of the reasons why Merchant Bank got us into that was because all the financing of oil imports of Ghana was based on foreign exchange from cocoa. And we were in a situation in 82, 83, where, cocoa production was declining in this country. And you had a project which was meant to reverse the tide. And we got involved based on advice from our bankers, from IFC and so on. We got involved in trying to get that project going. In the same way as, for instance, we also got involved, by the way, in creating EcoBank. EcoBank Ghana had investment from GMPC. EcoBank 25 years later is now the biggest bank by assets in Ghana. I mean, so, there were people who had all these perspectives, but we without trying to get into all the detail of those cases, I ended up on a day in court when the judge had not indicated that she was going to pronounce judgment.
Yeah.
The trial wasn't done. There was a matter in the Supreme Court which had to be resolved the following week. The following Wednesday, the Supreme Court has set that day to decide on that matter, whether the IFC could be called as a witness in the case. And I go to court on it. The judge hadn't sat for 1.5 years. She kept postponing. Her clerk would postpone, again, give us notice of it. And suddenly I go to court, and the judge says the day of judgment is here. And she ends up sending me to prison. And, I laugh about it because, frankly, when I look back, it is quite funny. It's not so funny.
What was the level of shock, though? Because when you were entering the court, you didn't think they were going to pronounce judgment?
Absolutely. I drove myself to court. I picked up my friend Martin Newman, and I drove him to court. So at the end of the day, I had to give him my car keys.
Because you're going to swim.
But
wow.
But that morning, before I went to court, I told my wife, I'm just going to get a date because the case has been adjourned. So
wow.
And so we had this wonderful reading, from Genesis, the book of Genesis. We had, the Garden of Eden and so on. So we had a lovely Bible reading before I left home that morning.
Wow.
And I said,
to go and come.
Within a couple of hours, when things were developing, my sister, who had heard of what was going on, had to call her and say, your husband is heading not for home, but he's heading
going
for
to swamp.
So, anyway, in the end, as I keep saying, by God's own orchestration, even that Ensom experience, for me, was like another university experience because, I learned things about the law that I didn't learn in Legon, but that I learned in Ensom.
Wow.
Just from seeing how the law affects people, ordinary
so this was like
people.
First-hand seeing.
Direct. I had the benefit of all the legal advice. My colleague and friend and brother, Ivio Dankwa, was my lawyer. Roland Agbenoto was, also my junior counsel. He had been my student before. He also was, by then a very distinguished lawyer in practice. And he, and these were people defending me at no cost to me. There were people who came to my aid. And I had all that benefit. But when I looked at the people that I was with in Ensom in that period, those 5 months, there were people who should not have been. There was a juvenile, less than 16-year-old. He had been hauled into jail with his older brother because of some, I think, landlord and tenant matter, and they went and called the police on them and so on. Anyway,
So this is the first time you're seeing this firsthand.
It was, let me say this. It wasn't the first time because, in the 70s, I had also been involved in a number of human rights cases for people in prison. But you see, I didn't, what we did in those days was to try to bring forward, to try to bring up cases for them to be released without necessarily going into the details of their actual cases. So in that period, it was just, what is called the habeas corpus that we did to try to get them out of jail. But when I was in prison in 2008, I was hearing from actual prisoners cases of why they ended up being there. And
what was the most horrendous you had? Or one of the most horrendous stories?
There were people who'd been in jail for 12 years without trial. That's completely unconstitutional. 12 years without trial. There was a young man I remember, again, caught up in something about drugs because he was managing director of a company whose vessel had been hired by the people who did whatever they did. But he himself obviously didn't know anything about what they hired his vessel, the vessel, you know, and he ended up being in prison for a long time. You know, there were so many of those things, you know.
Yeah.
But I think for me, the most interesting aspect of those 5 months in prison can be summarized by what happened to me on the first Sunday when I was in prison at the United Church, where we go to worship. That was like the Protestant congregation. And I go to church there, and a pastor comes from Asamankasi, Pastor Jones. I now know him very well, Jones Owusu-Ejei. And he comes, and he starts off by sort of acknowledging me, you know, as somebody he had heard about, and now, you know,
Now face to face with this.
And then, but you see, before he preaches, a young lady comes to minister in song, and she gets up and she says, "You are in the right place at the right time." And I thought that meant something for me, because
Wow.
when the pastor then preached, he preached the Joseph story, Genesis 50:20. Joseph saying to his brothers, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." And that was a message for me, because whatever evil was meant about my being there, God meant it for good. And in fact, that was the title of a reflection I wrote a year later concerning that experience of prison.
Wow.
You know, so, I mean, through that period of interacting with all these people and so on, it was a rich experience. It was a rich human experience. And that's why I say that it was like going to university again and seeing how the law actually works. Law in action. You know, I used to do a program on GBC called Law in Action. And I saw the law. I didn't catch that
in my research. You did Law in Action?
Yes, I did Law in Action. So I
mean,
saw,
look, all of you are too young to know this, but really?
I saw Law in Action, feely, as they say.
This was on a TV program. When you again. Wow.
And so that was one angle about it. Then there was another human angle about it. You know, the day that I ended up having to be taken out of the prison with an asthmatic attack.
And when you had the asthmatic,
yes.
I was going to ask you about that.
You know, the day before that, the Saturday, I was out on the Sunday. On the Saturday, one of the prisoners came to me and said that a prisoner has a bad asthma attack, and was there anything I could do to help with medication? By then, my wife had brought me some new medication, a new inhaler, a much stronger kind of medication than my normal Ventolin inhaler. As soon as this person came, I gave away that new inhaler.
The new one.
And by evening that day, I had my own situation, which was beyond the Ventolin inhaler. And the Ventolin inhaler couldn't do anything about it.
So, no, wait a minute. So the new inhaler that would have worked, that's what you gave away?
That's what I gave away, yes.
And then you got your
I got my
attack.
And again, by God's grace, by the morning, the situation clearly was dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have died. I mean, really, it's as simple as that. The director of that prison, may he rest in peace, he sadly passed away. He was feeling so helpless because they took me to Saom Hospital. They couldn't manage the situation, and there had to be an evacuation to Kolebu or 37 or wherever. To cut a long story short, it was my wife who they allowed to organize an ambulance
From Accra.
from Koforidoa
Yeah. To come get
to
you.
come
To Swam.
to Nsom because there was no ambulance in the prison, no ambulance anywhere. And then first 37, and then at 37 they saw that their ICU could probably not handle the situation, so they
they
moved
sent you
me
to
to Kolebu,
Kolebu.
the National Cardiothoracic Center. But the good news is that so I was able to have medical attention in the end. So thank God I'm still alive.
Yeah.
But that meant that that other prisoner was also saved. And can you believe it? 10 years from the day that I went to prison, we went with this Pastor Jones and a medical team to do a medical outreach. And a prisoner walks to me as, we're interacting. And he says, "Do you remember me? I'm the one who came for that inhaler."
Oh, to give to the...
To give to the person who had asthmatic attack. And he says to me, "You know what? That gentleman is always so grateful to you because his life was saved. He came out of prison. Now he's in Germany.
Oh, is it? Wow.
Now he's in Germany. And
Wow.
he can't stop
Talking about
recalling that inhaler thing.
that inhaler moment.
Yes. And
Saved his life.
for me, that's why I'm saying that they may have meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Because when I look at that human experience that I had in that context, I can only thank God for taking me through even that. And I would like to believe that it was a process of refining whatever I had. And my wife and I look back on that because, again, that was not an experience that I went through just by myself. If it hadn't been for the support, you remember I told you that she wouldn't even have me eat food in the prison. She wanted me to eat home-cooked food and brought me food every single day. I mean,
So
that level,
every single day.
every single day, she came and she had her own job to do.
Yeah, so some love, man.
So, when I think about that, my siblings, the support that I received, my mother came to the prison. She was then past 80. She came to the prison. I mean, and I'm speechless because that's what energizes me. That is what gives me the assurance that, God is doing something beyond just my own human capabilities.
Yeah.
And I can only thank God. I can only feel.
And I saw some writings some things that you have written.
Yes.
Every anniversary, I saw one called
The
something of
last one I
praise.
wrote was the overflow of
The
praise.
Overflow of
And
Praise.
that overflow of praise. Actually, there's a passage that I should share with you. It's a passage that really sort of ministered to me, particularly in the period when I was writing that reflection 10 years on. And incidentally, that was when we did this outreach, when they reminded me that inhaler worked. Psalm 63, a Psalm of David, in which, he expresses his thirst for God. But the particular translation that I saw around that time, which just ministered deeply to me, is called the Passion Translation. And let me just read you a few verses of Psalm 63 in the Passion Translation. It says, and this is David crying out to God, "I'm energized every time I enter your heavenly sanctuary to seek more of your power and drink in more of your glory. How I love and praise you, God. Daily, I will worship you passionately and with all my heart. My arms will wave to you like banners of praise. I overflow with praise when I come before you, for the anointing of your presence satisfies me like nothing else." You are such a rich banquet of pleasure to my soul. I lie awake each night thinking of you and reflecting on how you help me like a father. I sing through the night under your splendor shadow, offering up to you my songs of delight and joy. With passion, I pursue and cling to you. Because I feel your grip on my life, I keep my soul close to your heart. With the anointing of a king, I will dance and rejoice.
Wow. Wow.
Incidentally, the dancing part my wife does because my feet are not quite so coordinated.
There's stories when in hospital with the attack, she would visit you and you had her sing a song, or she sing a song over and over again.
You know, and in fact, the song that she would sing over and over was Danny Nette's song, I will worship you. I will lift up your name on high. You are Lord. Yes, you are. In those days, she had been singing it as part of our song group in church.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it was Danny Nette's song.
Okay.
And it, again, when I was in prison, it used to ring in my ears. And so when I came out of prison, I was having a chat with one of our younger friends. And when I mentioned the song, he said, that's Danny Nette's song.
Wow.
So I said, who is Danny Nette? And so that also set me on a course to, we had to look for Danny Nette. And Danny Nette.
So you met him finally?
We met him. Danny Nette became our son. And, you know, it is sad that he went so early. But Danny Nette was somebody who gave us such joy with what God had anointed him with. And
it's interesting to hear you talk about such passion and reverence for God. And it's like, actually, I mean, this is not like just sing on the side that don't passion. It's like,
well, you know,
there's a relationship.
Yeah, I know that people often say, oh, but this man, he became a socialist. And so when he became a socialist, he was an atheist. Well, this is one socialist who never became an atheist.
Put your hands together.
And you know, and I mean, from Scripture Union in Mfanspim. In fact,
you said at Scripture Union in Mfanspim?
Yeah, I was in Scripture Union. And it was Miss Florence Yeboah, who was then Deputy Traveling Secretary of Scripture Union.
Wow.
To Nigel Sylvester, I think it was. And it was on one of her missions at Mfanspim, that's when I really became a committed Christian, because of Florence Yeboah. So again, I'm telling you about people who make an impact that is for life. So that was when I was about 11. You know, 62, thereabouts.
Really?
I was about 11. And that carried me through. My parents were, of course, you know, Christians, and they brought us up in a Christian home and so on. But in terms of my personal conviction, we're talking about from that period with Florence.
So you're around 11?
Yes.
When you developed that closeness?
Yes. And through university, you know, through Legon, when I was in the University Christian Fellowship as well, that's where I met and became so close with Professor Ivio Dankwa, for instance. And again, some of the experiences of that period are just unforgettable. At that time, Mr. William Oforiatta had just come out of prison himself under the Nkrumah period. And he would come and speak to us at the University Christian Fellowship. And he would speak to us, we'd all be so excited at Pa Willie and so on. And for some reason, he took to me, because I was, again, a little boy. Pa Willie, after coming to speak to us, University Christian Fellowship, above the bookshop in those days, he would actually come down and walk with me to my room in Legon Hall. Check it out. Big 6 Pa Willie, walking with this Chachichikata 17-year-old, you know, in Legon.
To your room?
To my room. In those days, my roommate was Duke Dankwa, his nephew. So that was an added reason for
Put your hands together, man. Really?
So I mean, you know, that kind of impact also at that age was unforgettable. You know,
I
both
hate to cut you because we are running out of time. But I spoke with some of your brothers, and I said, I want you guys. Just what do you think of your brother? Just send me some one-liner. So I want to read it to you. I spoke with Chidi Doche and then your cousin Kofi.
yeah.
So I'm going to read what they sent to me, and I want to see whether you can guess who would have sent that. Yeah? So I'm starting with the first one that says this. He is the most easygoing and down-to-earth kind of person who, despite his level of knowledge and higher control over the English language, will never intimidate or overwhelm you in a conversation. He would always come down to your level and make you feel at home with yourself.
That's
Show
Kofi.
some love.
That's Kofi. That's Kofi. My nephew.
You're
That's
right.
Kofi, my nephew.
Let me read the second one and tell me who wrote it. Very, very simple. He says, a person of conviction, one who lives by his convictions almost to a fault. Who sent that?
Chidi.
They all say things like this, you know, your conviction almost to a fault. And I just want to wrap up in the next few minutes because it was that conviction, even when you've gone through all the financial aid crisis and the whatever, and magnanimous ex-President Kufuor says, I'm pardoning you. You said, take that pardon. I didn't deserve this anyway.
You know, actually, I think I said it nicely.
Oh, you did. You did.
I wrote him a letter from my hospital bed.
Yeah.
And I just said that, you know, I would not accept his pardon. And I wouldn't accept it because by then I already had an appeal pending against the decision that had been taken. And I wanted to be, you know, vindicated.
Yeah, not pardoned.
Not pardoned.
You want to go through the process and be
when
vindicated.
you're pardoned, it means that the conviction still stands. But the penalty has been wiped away.
Okay.
And I really...
So it took you 8 years.
Yes, it took me 8 years.
To win the...
But in the end, the Court of Appeal decided unanimously in my favor and quashed the conviction 8 years later.
All right. All right. Now, just before we leave...
To the glory of God. Not
to the glory of
not,
God.
Not to my...
When you were in prison, I think one person that energized me and actually came to visit one day, you know, was when I met your wife Esther.
Absolutely.
And she picked up this whole crusade, Free Tsatsu. You know, it was absolutely fantastic.
Yes,
if Esther is watching, do you have a word to tell her wherever she is, Esther?
I'll tell her privately.
Tell her privately. Just so loud, man. Well, folks, man, this has been exciting coming to you from the Cactus Creek. Let's have a chat with Tsatsu. And the man has promised, so you heard it. He says he will come back after the verdict, and that time he will be it will be Tsatsu in the box.
Just make sure that it's a big enough box.
But really, thank you. I'm glad that your time was limited and everything, but you said you are committed to coming, so you are here.
I'm glad we had this chat. And you know, I have to say to you that you probably don't remember it, but there was a time that you and I were talking about something and you quoted Ephesians at me about, you know, exceedingly abundantly and all that. And then I remember that we are Osofuba.
Okay, folks, man. Oh, man. What a great chat we have had with Tsatsu. And the whole Ghana is looking for the part 2 when we're going to have him in the box. Don't forget, this Friday, KSM Show is on again. This time I have Zion Felix. Tune in. But until then, I'm so glad. All I can say for now is, what am I going to say? We are out of, let the whole world say, yeah.
KSM Show.